And we're back with It's Time to Listen, a video podcast by Nina Meyer. Today's guest is Lauren Boboto, founder of the SOAS Voice of Congo Society.
Hi, I'm Nina.
And I'm Lauren.
Today, Lauren will shed some light on the Congolese genocide, government aid, politics, education, and the remembrance culture in the DRC.
I was born in Ealing, in the UK, and my parents were born in DRC.
Okay, so that's your connection to the DRC.
Yeah.
Did they ever tell you what life in Congo was like?
Yeah, so my parents grew up, well, especially my dad, he grew up poor, so he kind of had to work his way up in society. So that was mostly kind of doing very labouring jobs, because there weren't a lot of jobs in Congo. And that was kind of my mom, but it's interesting, my mom grew up a lot better, but they still had to do a lot of labouring jobs just because there weren't a lot of jobs growing up, and there weren't a lot of opportunities growing up.
When they talk about, Congo, do they look back at it with sort of positive or negative, memories, or what kind of memories do they attach to the Congo?
More so, I guess, negative, because as much as my parents love Congo, we had a dictator. I think it's more kind of pessimism rather than just general negativity. It's more okay, but Congo is never going to change because it hasn't changed in the last 100 or so years. I think the difference between kind of my parents and me is that I feel like it can change and it will change, but it's more so for my parents, which is understandable because they grew up their whole life seeing again and again these kind of the same kind of rulers come in. It's more so, okay, but it's not, how can it change now if this has always been the history, it's always been like this? We should just get out while we can.
So where do you think you get your hopefulness about a change for a better future? Where do you think you got that motivation or optimism?
I think I started getting into Congolese history probably in year 7 time, so when I was 13, and I read Heart of Darkness. That kind of put me up a little bit. I was like, oh god, this is a really horrible thing. Why is this allowed? Why have I never heard about this? I was I've never heard about Congo in the news. This is such a horrible thing, or we're never taught it in school. So I always wondered why. And then I read a book from Dambisa Moyo, the Why Aid Doesn't Work and Why There's a Better Way for Africa, and just that kind of radical view of why aid isn't working when it's such a kind of almost an understood thing to we give charity and it's going to help out and everything's going to be better, and someone saying this is not the way, and changing kind of my understanding in that. I think that's where I got my optimism in my head. Just something small, we'll be talking about politics in Guinea or something, and they kind of just
look at you.
Yeah, and I was I don't know any, I know as much as you, I don't know anything. Kind of stuff like that, and the whole generalizing Africans as Africans, and so do you speak African? And I have gotten that question at least once this year.
What kind of a language do they think African is?
I have no idea. I think they had something that sounds. I mean, some people I've been asked if I have clicking my language that. Yeah. No.
And you were also talking about aid. So what's your opinion on government aid, but also things like reparations or any kind of financial compensation?
Aid is unfortunately political, or government aid anyway, and other ones. But if we're talking about government aid, it's definitely political. So I feel the way in which it's implemented kind of works in the interests of those who implement it, and I don't think that's necessarily, if we're talking about Congolese people. The figure that I read was 15 trillion pounds have gone into Congo. That's a huge amount of money. I mean, doesn't even match towards the natural resources, but it's still a huge amount of money to go into so-called aid. And if anything, the country has just gone worse and worse and worse.
You say your parents do they show interest in sort of history before the European invasion?
Yeah.
Do they talk to you about that?
I think what's interesting about I think a lot of kind of older Congolese people is that they're always very hesitant to kind of tell their story because it's almost like they almost see it as insignificant to like the real world. They're like, okay, but this happened to my family, but how am I gonna like make sure my children do well? How am I gonna make sure that I have like a good forever? How
So like a survival mode almost?
Yeah, it's almost like they're like, okay, but that's not gonna change how I'm living now. So let me just live now and have a good life and like not dwell on the past really. But when they do talk about it, it's really interesting to like my auntie. And obviously I know my auntie, well, she's not like my blood auntie, but like auntie, yeah. So I remember she kind of like spoke to me once, and it was so passingly, but she was like, oh yeah, like you're interested in politics. Like my dad was a rebel leader and he was like in the forest with like Che Guevara and stuff like that. And I was just like, whoa, like why have you been keeping this information my whole life? But I think they just don't see it as, because they had to live through that, and they see the kind of, we look at the history, we're like, oh, that's so like interesting, like how could they not? But if they've lived through it and they see the consequences like of that, they don't really see it as something that is of interest to anyone really.
Or what do you say the remembrance culture is like then in the Congo? If people are really not willing, or maybe not willing, but they don't really talk about the past.
The unfortunate thing about it is that it happens like every day, and like the genocide is still going on, especially in the east. And I think that as much from the remembrance, I mean, I can't talk about in Congo because I'm actually not sure, but I feel like the sad thing is that it happens every single day and every single year, and it just gets worse and worse. And I think 6 million people have died since the 90s. I mean, how can you even sit down to remember this person, and the next day there's like another dozen people who have died because of whatever's going on. So I think it's very difficult.
Well, thank you so much for answering my questions. Is there anything else you want to say or you want to add?
Can I do like a shameless plug of my site?
Yeah, oh yeah, of course, yeah, do that.
Go like my site and SOAS Congo. What was kind of sad to me is that there wasn't a real atmosphere for like Congolese issues at SOAS, and I know that kind of years and years, like 2011 they had like a Congo week and etc, but it kind of like died down, I guess, when those people graduated and it's like no one to kind of pick it up again. So we started a society, and what we do really is just raise more awareness, have like a place at SOAS for kind of Congolese people, and not just that, people who are interested in Congo, to kind of campaign. So right now we're doing an initiative called the Conflict Free Campus. So it's to do with like the kind of use of like conflict minerals that inadvertently affect that region of east of DRC. So yeah, I mean, it's really cool.
Okay, cool. That's the important thing. So everybody go like the Facebook page. I'll put in the name on the bottom.
Yeah,
right there. And yes, thank you so much, Lauren, for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And it was a great conversation.
Thank you.